Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started just so we don't get too far behind on time. So just go over what we're going to cover tonight. So we have Glimpse here with us tonight as our kind of special guest speaker. They were the first place winner in the competition last year, so they're here to kind of share their story with you, and you can ask any questions that you have of them. Feel free while they're talking to put any questions that you have in the chat. I'd say wait until they're kind of done talking to shout out any answers, just because Zoom doesn't, or any questions, because Zoom doesn't do well with people kind of talking over each other. But feel free to shout things out in the chat as they're going. And then we're going to go over market need and the reasons why startups fail. And then we're going to talk about how to talk to customers, which coincides with the homework assignment that you had to read Talking to Humans. And then we'll do a little mock customer interview to help you practice doing those interviews before you go out and do them. So first up, we have Team Glimpse here. Please welcome them, and like I said, ask any questions that you have of them. I'll turn it over to Akash or Kushal, whoever's going to start.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for having us. The BMC and just being part of like the Purdue entrepreneurship ecosystem helped us get our startup off the ground. So we're grateful to be here. And I'm Akash. I'm one of the founders. I'm here with my two other co-founders, Kushal and Anuj. And so yeah, we'll kind of like just run through, I guess, kind of our story and then where we're at, and then try to tie in some like key things that we learned as well in terms of like being able to like relevant to what you guys are doing right now with like how you talk to users and iterate. But just where we at right now at a high level, we're building a marketplace where like consumer brands, so like mattresses, coffee, and these types of products, their brands can use our platform to find short-term rental properties like Airbnbs, VRBOs, and HomeAways to place their products into these properties, so that the consumers that are staying in there can like naturally try the product during their stay, and then have like a way to purchase the item. So it's essentially like a new marketing and sales channels for these brands. Um, so I studied computer engineering and industrial management at Purdue, and I graduated in May. I knew you want to quickly introduce yourselves.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go for it.
yeah. So I studied computer engineering at Purdue. I'm still studying computer engineering at Purdue. I'm in the class of 2022, and I'm doing this next semester completely remote while running Glimpse. But a bit about me, I met Akash when I was a freshman at Purdue about 2 years ago in 2018. And that's when we started working on startups together. And then shortly thereafter, we met Anuj, who then joined our journey. And Anuj, if you want to give your background by yourself as well.
Yeah, so I'm the third co-founder. I'm Anuj. I graduated from Purdue this past December in industrial engineering and a minor in management. And yeah, like Kushal was saying, started working with these guys like 1.5, 2 years ago or something like that now, on a variety of different ideas. We were working on all kinds of different things that were not Glimpse at all, before we even came to this idea in the first place. And really excited to, kind of share the story with all of you guys. I guess, maybe we can kind of break it up into sort of the phases of the company. I can start by talking a little bit about, how just talking to users in the first place even got us the idea. And then there's a lot of examples down the road that maybe Kushal and Akash, you guys want to touch on after.
Sounds
Yeah,
good.
of course. And I just quickly to say like where we're at right now. So this past September we raised a $1.5 million seed round, led by this fund called Origin Ventures that were early investors in Grubhub or Cameo. And we brought on lots of different angel investors. And right before this past summer, we were part of Y Combinator's Summer 20 batch. And Y Combinator is a startup accelerator. Now it's remote, but it used to be in Silicon Valley, that was part of the early journeys of companies like Airbnb and like DoorDash and Instacart. And then we essentially now actually just send out like our first job offers to start growing our team. So we're at an exciting time, and like just for the past years we've had this like crazy journey, which I guess Anuj can start with and talk about a lot of our iterations, and how competitions like the BMC helped us sort of like get good direction as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, kind of from the sort of very beginning, like I was saying, we were working on totally different ideas. So right when I joined, it was, we were delivering late night food to people on campus, and so literally that next day we met up again and completely changed the idea to something that we stuck with for a little bit longer, which was running pop-up shops on campuses. And so we were working with a variety of different companies that wanted to get exposure to college students and interact with college students because that's who their product was for. And so we were helping them set up experiences on campus. So everything from getting a U-Haul truck and setting up an experience in the back and driving it to the middle of campus to helping set up tables where people could try products and a variety of different things. And so this is kind of, I think, one of the most pivotal customer conversations that we had really came into play, where we were, everyone that we were working with, all the customers, we'd really go deep into what they were trying to get out of this and what they were looking for. And so we had a pretty unique experience where, so we had just worked with a bunch of these different companies, everything from like CBD cookies to back to this massaging backpack and a variety of different products to do this advertising experience. And we were starting to figure out how to standardize it a little bit. And then we had this company come to us that was a card game. Actually, it was like a drinking card game, and they wanted us to, rather than set up the same marketing experience that we set up for, all of these other companies that we had been working with. They wanted us to instead just kind of place them into bars and places where people would naturally use their product. And so we kind of dove into this deeper with them, trying to understand what they wanted. So, they were trying to essentially create the experience where this product would seem like it was already just, meant to be there. It was left out to be used in this setting that you would expect to find something like a drinking card game and be used organically. And so that kind of first experience is what even sparked that first conversation is what even sparked the idea for Glimpse. And that is, I think, really just like the earliest signs of where we even got this. And so after that, I think the first big experience we had with talking to users and trying to validate this idea was trying to figure out where this sort of concept can be applied. And so the way we thought about it is, okay, we just need to get as many eyes on this idea in different places where we think this concept could work and see how they respond. Basically, like we know that we don't know exactly the best place. Like we have some ideas. So we started off with places like Ubers, and we thought about places like Airbnbs, which is, what we ended up sticking with. And everything else too, like bars and restaurants and all these places where we basically, our first thought was to try to just talk to as many of these people as possible. And so the one thing that, to balance with this too is, so we thought about it, one, in terms of like the quality of like, how deep are we interacting with people. So we tried to schedule some calls. We tried to directly message some people to get their thoughts, but we also kind of thought about it in a large scale way, where we approached it as talking to these users by getting into communities that they're already in and trying to pull large numbers of people. So for example, the Airbnb host example, we found that they're really concentrated in Reddit, for example. There's a subreddit with thousands of hosts. And so we would post, and we created a basic landing page that would allow them to sign up for a wait list. And just by, kind of posting that and getting it out there, we started getting comments about how people thought about this idea, what was important to them, what wasn't important to them. And then the most, compelling thing was that we got this giant wait list. Just like, overnight, we had over 100 signups that, people were excited to try the idea out. They wanted to see if they could get products that they could showcase naturally in their short-term rentals. And so I think that was like one, really critical part of the journey, where we really, just kind of got the idea out there in front of customers. We found this unique channel of a social media community to access a group that, we didn't know a single Airbnb host personally. And so that sort of, I think, set the initial momentum. And there's, multiple examples too after this of, kind of how we scale it up. So, Kushal or Kash, if you kind of want to take it to the, sort of next phase, going into YC, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think Anuj touched upon in detail about like the host side of our business in terms of how we talk to some of the customers on the Airbnb side. I can talk a bit about how we talk to some of the brands, and then Akash, I guess you can talk about then like Y Combinator and then what we're doing now. So essentially, like since we're a marketplace, we kind of have multiple stakeholders. So we have brands that pay us money. They put their products into these Airbnb properties so that the guests who come and stay in these properties can use the product, learn about it, and then purchase it afterwards. So using some of these like grassroots channels like Reddit, Facebook communities, and other groups, we're able to like get surveys from hosts, learn about hosts, and engage with them pretty quickly. And then on the brand side, in terms of talking to customers, what we really learned is that the Purdue.edu email is a really powerful tool. So what we started to do is we started to just go and find email addresses of marketing managers, VP of marketing, CMOs, anybody really that we could sell to at these big corporations, at brands. And we just found all their emails. So we'd go on LinkedIn, look at contacts, use like an email tool like called Clearbit or Hunter.io, and then find these people's email addresses and then send them emails through our Purdue.edu email address saying like, hey, we're college students trying to learn. Can you get on a 15-minute, 30-minute phone call to chat about this idea that we have? And I think that was really helpful for us initially because it started the conversation and allowed us to like talk to these customers, understand what their key needs are, and refine the pitch. So once we're able to finally get in front of some of these marketing managers, some of these like CMOs, we started to talk to them about essentially what we're offering. And like the key thing we're offering to them was reach and access and distributed showrooms. So a lot of these brands, the key problem for them is they have a product, but a physical product, but they only sell it through e-commerce channels. So for example, like Casper.com, a massive mattress company, they have very limited showrooms. They only have a couple of showrooms across the country, but they're almost $1 billion company. And so all their sales come from the e-commerce channel. So the way we positioned it when we're talking to them is, hey, we know you have an amazing product, but your consumers can never really experience it until they purchase your $1,000 mattress and it's at their doorstep and they have to install it. Why don't we get your products into Airbnbs and other short-term rentals so that people can engage with it and try it out in a natural setting when they're on vacation, when they're in this mindset of just experiencing new things. And so like essentially the way we went about with customer discovery and just talking to these customers is we took the student approach and we tried to prod at them for some of the issues that they face. So once we're able to get on the phone call, we asked them like, how do you guys currently tackle retail? How do you guys get the customer to really engage and learn about the product? And aside from just having like 1 or 2 showrooms in LA and New York, they didn't really have any answers. So we knew there was an opportunity here. And once we collected enough of data points from all these different brands, we realized that they all shared the same issue, which is they have an e-commerce presence, but they have no way for customers to really experience the product in person, to feel what it is, what it's like. And then so we went back to these brands since we already established a relationship with our product, with this platform where they can scale and distribute through Airbnbs. And they were very receptive to working with us. And that's essentially how we got our first few customers, kind of using the student approach to getting through the door and then building that relationship.
Yeah, of course. I guess I'll jump in now. But I think like the key thing that I want to highlight from like what both Anuj and Kushal said was we were figuring out outcomes and how to force those conversations. So we never really thought about like just building without any direction. We made sure to like get feedback and at least show like interest. So I think like if you're building like a consumer company, for example, the approach that Anuj mentioned of just like quickly putting together a landing page and a wait list to see if people sign up is a really great way to just like hone the pitch and the like that messaging of what you're creating. And then also being able to see the people who sign up like immediately, you can just hop on, like try to hop on the phone with them and like pick their brain. Then on the brand side, like if we're building like a business to business where it's much harder to get those conversations, like using the student card or whatever it is, to especially be able to talk to um Purdue alumni or these employees at companies, like they probably don't get to share their advice or like learnings a ton in their career because they're usually the ones like building their careers. So they're always happy to like share their advice, even if like you have no affiliation. I think one strength on that side is just like being able to write like a really effective like cold email and just like getting that conversation going. And so yeah, I can dive into a little bit about like some of the key learnings that we had as we so like basically while we were still at Purdue last semester, I guess like right before sort of like COVID started and stuff, and when we were pitching like for the BMC, we had essentially gotten to the point of like a tiny amount of traction. Like we had a cool concept, we had some great like customer interviews and testimonials, but the key thing that we wanted to dive in deeper was like now like once we actually start building like a product and a solution for them, like how can we like iterate on that like effectively and have those conversations. And I think the key thing that we learned is like in this situation we're not building a solution for ourselves where we're the end user, so we try to have like a few early users just keep on using the product and like collecting feedback. One cool thing is that if your idea right now with this competition is for yourself, like you're the end user, you can just have like your friends start testing it, start asking them questions, and build for yourself like what you'd want to use. If you're not, then yeah, the key thing is try to find a few customer users that are willing to like pilot it or like test it with you that you can utilize. And then jumping into YC, YC has a lot of really great lessons that I think can be like a really great complement to like these types of workshops because they're all available like publicly online. The key lessons that we sort of had just from like really sort of honing in on like the Y Combinator mindset is like one, just kind of like keep on launching. So the way that we did that was like we just kept spinning up like different websites, like landing pages. It takes like less than a few hours to build one. You could use like a website builder, or if you're relatively like understand technical concepts, you can just Google how to build a landing page, find like a template, and just change the text to like match what you need. So for us, that was the best way that we just kept launching and launching again. You get like really quick feedback and really quick like interest. Like we wouldn't have ever started Glimpse if we didn't have success with that Reddit launch that we did like that one night, like at the end of like November. Like if we didn't have any hosts sign up, we would have never even thought about Glimpse as a concept because we wouldn't have had like belief that there was people who would actually use it because we weren't the end user ourselves. So that's like one key lesson that I think that we basically learned even as we go into YC. Like from YC, we have like probably around us, we had like tons of our batchmates that pivoted their idea halfway through. Some of YC's most successful companies like shifted their idea halfway through YC. So they really try to hone in and just like keep on launching, keep talking to users, be close to early users. And then I think the other thing tied to that is like, don't be afraid to start building an MVP and like take a step back from like what your MVP actually needs to be. Like it doesn't need to be a full-fledged like software product for you to be able to start like seeing how people like use it. Like it can be like for us, for example, with our pop-up shop business, we just had a form that people could fill out if they wanted to like set up a pop-up and then try to set up like some email process and like flyers to like do the whole loop. We never actually built a product for that business and we were generating revenue. So it was like for us, the MVP, we took a step back and looked at what that could be. And like when we were going through YC, we actually hit like a few roadblocks like in the beginning with our approach. And we just like kept thinking about like having conversations and thinking about how we could iterate it. And then as we approached sort of like the end of YC, we were able to like iterate our business model slightly and then generate more revenue like as we came out of the program. And even now, like, you know, like we have a lot of kind of like uncertainties across the different aspects of our business model, but like we're able to like we've been able to find this pain point just by having these conversations that have led us to like start generating like revenue and growth. So I think like the other pieces of advice that were really useful for us other than just like being able to iterate quickly is just like yeah, have the conversations and start setting like basic metrics that I guess you can follow. Like even if it's not related to revenue, for example, if you want to make sure that you have like 20 conversations and then I'm trying to see like specific insights, like try to like set that on a weekly cadence to make sure you're like consistent with it. For user interviews, there's one book, a good book that is called like the Mom Project that I think you can find online. That's like it gives a really good summary on how to do like these interviews as well that I'd recommend. But yeah, I mean, and then now we're starting to grow our revenue. So our goal is to hit our Series A metrics for like our next round of funding by mid 2021. And now we're sort of scaling up our revenue. Sorry. I think the book. Wait, Anuj, is it called the Mom Test or the Mom Project? Mom Test,
The
right?
mom test. Yeah, basically
The Mom Test.
like if you tell an idea to your mom and ask her if it's good, she's probably going to tell you it's good. And so there's a lot of really good insights into like how to not, bias the way you're talking to people and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'll send this link. Um, this is a summary that I just found just by googling it. But our YC investors who created like the Pebble watches, he like lives by this book. Like he tells like everyone to read it, so we highly recommend it. Um, but yeah, now we're really focused on just kind of growing our revenue and being able to hit our Series A fundraising milestones. And a lot of the things that we discussed that were things that kind of got us here in the first place through like quick iterations, pivoting and talking to users, they still very much apply to like the day to day of like what we do at Glimpse right now. Like, we iterate on our business model a lot for brands. We think about how we can optimize like different processes. And a lot of these, we're trying to introduce new ways to like collect feedback within our software from our users and stuff as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about a high level about our journey. Like we can answer any questions, have like super casual conversations. We were in your shoes like just a year ago, so probably can share like a lot of not obvious insights as well that we may not have covered that weren't as high level. So anyone I think can just like jump in and ask a question uh, off mute or in the chat.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah, of course.
All right. So, yeah. So this is, yeah. Thank you so much for speaking, by the way. This is really insightful. I just have one question. So I guess in the initial stages when you guys were developing this idea and things like that, I guess people always look for like traction, like how many customers you have initially, or like just some type of kind of metric to see like how well your company is doing. So I guess one of the questions I had is like, what type of like traction or like how much traction do you think is needed in order to like before approaching investor, before approaching accelerators like Y Combinator, like how much traction should you be getting before you actually take that next step?
I think
Yeah, go.
yeah, it can really vary. So it's the one thing that I feel like I especially learned is it's usually a lot less than you think. Usually it seems like you have to really make something perfect and you really have to be far along in something to be able to either, take it to a customer or take it to an investor, that sort of thing. But it's really just about proving out that there's a market need for it and that there's a pull and that you're basically capable of being the one to accomplish it. So for example, with the investor front, with Y Combinator, for example, like those are kind of the two things that they look for. Like, can you really prove whether it's through, maybe you have like on the more advanced case, you have like 30 paying customers that are doing, that are already paying you to do this thing. Or on the flip side, maybe you just have a long wait list of people that have already just committed to being like, I want you to do this for me. Like, and you maybe don't even have revenue yet. You haven't started working on it fully yet, but you can prove that you're the right team to tackle it is almost equally as valuable in someone like their eyes, for example. Same thing with a customer, for example. The way that we kind of had to work, since we have a marketplace that where there's like properties, for example, and there's also brands. When we initially wanted to get this thing started, we had to choose kind of like, okay, what angle are we going to tackle first? And so we went the route of trying to get some like initial host interest. So we had that wait list out, for example. Like we had gotten to a point where there were like dozens and dozens of properties that were just, signing up on that wait list. So then our thought process is kind of like, okay, now let's take that wait list that we have that we haven't proven, like we haven't done anything necessarily yet, except for prove the fact that people want this, but that's enough to take it to a brand now and be like, hey, there's all this demand. Like we can make it happen for you. We can make your, products get placed into all these unique properties. And it's just a matter of, working at that hard enough where you can get someone to be that first early adopter that's like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll take a chance on you. Now you have a product, so now you go back to the host side, for example, with us, and now you get more properties onboarded because you have a product, and it just kind of goes back and forth like that, where always you don't necessarily need your final product, your most perfect version of something to actually get it started. You just kind of need the bare minimum to get one person on the other side to sort of commit, and it depends on the type of business, of course. Like same thing, even if you were just selling a brand for like a B2B software or something like that, like if you can just prove that you have the capability to accomplish it, and have and just establish enough credibility where they believe you can make it happen, that's really all you need. And definitely same thing applies for investors too.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
all really about
and
the story that you tell.
yeah, and the only thing I'd add there is like I think it really also depends on what type of business you're building. Because if you're building like a biotech or a hardware company, it's really hard to get a product or get some users before raising funding. So in that case, like oftentimes you generally don't have much more than really good insights or learnings about your customers. And that's perfectly fine. I think that's actually one of the main things YC looks for, that Y Combinator looks for is like, can you teach them something about your customers, or do you have some unique insights that nobody else does, that they can get across when you talk to these investors? But then on the flip side, there's a lot of businesses where you almost don't need any money to get off the ground or to get users. For example, like a social network. Anybody can, if you know how to code, can get a social network built out, can get login pages set up. You can start collecting signups if you're building a SaaS, like a software as a service, or some other tools. A lot of businesses where having those initial customers is the only traction that you need, and you don't need to raise any money. For example, Robinhood. I believe Robinhood had like a 1 million person waitlist before even launching their product. And just even to build that waitlist, you really don't need to raise money to build that waitlist. So I think that like, and it really depends, and it comes down to what type of business you're building. But the key thing here, and like the bottom line, is just understanding your customer and being able to teach investors or people you're pitching to some unique insights about them.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Does anybody have any other questions? We can answer anything. Answer about like college life, answer about what startup life is like, work-life balance.
I've got a question in the same vein as the one in the chat. Is there any way that you can sort of defend the idea that you have, or is it sort of similar to the Airbnb kind of thing where you just want to be the first there and then grow and have the network in place? Is there any way that you plan to like defend the idea that you've come up with?
Yeah, definitely. So there's different angles in which like defensibility comes about in a business. I think that something like a patent is a very obvious thing for something that's like very deep tech, but for a lot of like software businesses or services, a patent doesn't really do anything. Like for simple code, for example, like Instagram can patent like 100 lines of code or whatever in something that they're building, but then someone can just like rewrite that code in a different way, and then the patent becomes useless. So I think that for its defensibility comes in like different types of business models. So for us building a marketplace, there's a few different ways that we're building defensibility. Obviously, being a first mover is an advantage, but longer term, there's these things called like network effects, which is essentially like people can't like they don't want to leave your platform because there's like no other like great option, and then people just keep on joining. It's like a flywheel because you've sort of like built this like system where both sides like work really well together. So for example, like with Airbnb, the hosts are going to keep listing on Airbnb because it's like the best way for them to make money. So as a result, more consumers will come onto like their marketplace to sign up, and that's like a moat in itself. I think a lot, and then for us, the three moats that we're utilizing. So one is kind of like the data that we're collecting. Like we're building like a unique sort of data set of types of properties and the types of products that can go into them, and the consumer insights like that we're collecting. No other company can do that unless they're in that those same exact properties doing the same exact thing. The second thing is sort of the brand and the in-home experience that we're defining and building. Something like brand is like not as measurable, but it's something that really stands out. Like the trusted brands that you use in your day-to-day life, like their moat is the fact that like you're using that brand because of either a better experience, being a first mover, etc. And then finally, I think the scale, just being able to be like a venture-backed startup and have capital to be able to have capital more than our competitors to be able to move faster, whatever it is. We're able to build the number of properties in our network at a rate that hypothetically, if we keep moving at this pace, will be much faster than anywhere else. So if any brand wants to come to us, so like a Nike or something like that, like they won't go to like a small company that can only get them into 500 properties because there's a company like us that can get them into like 5,000 properties. And just being able to grow at that pace, I think those are the three modes that we think about in terms of defensibility. And I think that most software businesses or like marketplaces or like consumer businesses, like these are the types of modes that you have to sort of like identify in terms of, because ultimately what you control is the customer, not like yeah. So that was a little bit of a high level, but I hope that shared some clarity. Um, and then for Akshay's question in the chat, how much marketing did we do initially to get your brand and mission out there? So we actually have like never spent a dollar really on like marketing or anything yet. Like we didn't before the BMC, even like we didn't really have capital to spend, so we did everything like super frugally. So even now, like we've never invested in ads. We have done a lot of work though, like just like with like guerrilla marketing and like getting into Facebook groups and promoting Glimpse and trying to build our own like Instagram presence and stuff like that. Um, I think initially like just targeting who your end user is and then being able to do simple ways of marketing to them, I think is like the best thing that you could really do to get your brand and mission out there. And then I think the most ideal situation that we're starting to see now is like if you have some early users that believe in your brand and mission, they'll start sharing it with their own friends that you may not know. Um, and I think that's kind of accelerated being able to like these digital strategies, like with COVID and stuff like that. So like we didn't really do anything that was like paid, but we did like join communities where our end users were and started like writing content, talking about the problem that we were solving, etc., to drive like users and like awareness about our brand.
So I have a question. How did winning the BMC last year impact your business? So you mentioned you didn't have capital before the BMC, so obviously you got prize money from it. So how did that, first, what is it, $20,000 help you? What were you able to accomplish with that? And did you meet anybody, when you were pitching in the finals that, became a part of your network and a supporter of yours?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I think that the winning the BMC helped us in like three big ways. One was like legal assistance, being able to work with Ice Miller as one of the sponsored prizes. We're still working with them, and they've been able to help us look a lot more legitimate to a lot of these bigger brands by having like very formal partnership agreements, how we should be thinking about things, etc. Two, with the capital, we were able to start like running experiments that limited us before. Like for example, our concept of being a product placement in like an Airbnb in like Hawaii or whatever it is, like we're not there physically to be able to control the whole thing, and we couldn't like sponsor like $1,000 mattress to just be in there. But we're able to start running these like small experiments that really proved some of the core concepts because we had this like capital that we could use to like experiment and test. And then finally, yeah, like one of the judges, Ruz Jazayeri, he's actually one of our angel investors now. Like we were able to meet him, start building that relationship. He liked the fact that we were just like working at Purdue and then working on this coming straight out of Purdue, and it's just been a part of our journey like ever since. A lot of the other judges have been mentors as well. So for example, like Kelly Caldwell, she like keeps in contact with us once in a while, shares advice wherever, etc. So definitely we're able to like just build relationships with the judges and also the preliminary competitions when we could like just get feedback on the pitch. A lot of the work for the BMC also helped like prepare us for like the story that we were telling, which is really critical for our YC interview or YC application. And even when we were raising our seed round now, like how we think about the storytelling part of our business. And then, sorry, Nancy's question, what did you present to back up your pitch? Yeah, it's kind of like the story and statistics back then when we didn't really have much. We basically, the story is essentially like right now you can't really try a mattress like anywhere. imagine if your mattress could be in like Airbnbs all over. We're making this possible with our marketplace. And then I think the most compelling part, so one thing like on the stats side, when you define the problem, it's like people who try the product are like 4x more likely to purchase after trying it. Being able to add a stat to back up the problem. But then after we described the solution, like the next slide right after that was like in 24 hours, we had like 100 Airbnb hosts sign up for the service to be able to receive these branded products and promote them to their guests. So we were able to back it up with how our landing page did. So not the fact that we had a landing page itself, but rather like that we were able to get signups. Like so, some action was called, and then now like at the seed stage, we're still super early, but it was still that same type of story. But we were able to add some brands as well. Like we have these brands that are paying us to use this, along with the pipeline of brands that are really interested in this type of channel based on our outreach.
And I think I've sent this out before, but Lola's going to post it again in the chat. We actually recorded the live final pitches from last year. So if you're interested in seeing Glimpse's final pitch that won them the competition, you can go and watch it and see their whole pitch. I think Nancy had another question.
How did you notice like your teammates? So I don't think we really knew to like select each other. So at least for me, like I'm a little bit biased because I was very involved in like the student community for entrepreneurship. But I met Kushal because he joined as a freshman in the club and then was my little. So we just started working on stuff together. And then through that same organization, DMK, like me and Anuj went on a trip to San Francisco together. And from there, we just both realized that we kind of had this similar passion for entrepreneurship, and then he joined us like shortly after. I think a lot it's like a balance of taking like a big leap, but then also understanding what's important to you and like the people that you're working with, whether it's like either the way that they think, their strengths, or sort of like the passion that they have for building this. Like I think the biggest thing that the three of us did together was that we took like a leap to like commit fully to this. Like in May, do this like completely full time. And I think that that was like a risk that you won't find with like, anyone, especially like at school and stuff like that. So how did you share with them the company? So back then, like we came up with the company ideas like ourselves. So we actually like met with the intent of just like trying to figure out a company together.
All right, I think we should probably let Glimpse go now so we can get to the rest of our content. But thank you guys so much again for coming and sharing your story with everybody and answering all these burning questions.
Awesome. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Great getting to talk to everyone and answer some questions.
Awesome.
All right,
Bye.
see you guys.
All right, see ya.
All right, so let's get to some content here. All right, so the business assumptions exercise from the last workshop that we did kind of at the end, I saw a number of people turned them in kind of recently as of like yesterday or earlier this morning. So we will send some feedback on those that were turned in, and you can still turn them in now. But does anybody have any trouble when you were answering the questions, anything that kind of surprised you or you didn't know how to answer on that? I don't see anybody. All right, so how about, I'm going to throw up a little poll here, and it is anonymous, so I won't know your personal response to this. So I want to know if you actually read Talking to Humans, the first part of it, or if you already read the whole thing. Be honest if you didn't. I just kind of, this is for my own knowledge to know if you've already gotten some of this, because what we're going to go over tonight relates a lot to that homework. And then the second part of the book will be assigned tonight as homework to read. So looks like about half and half ish. Some of you already read the whole thing, so that's cool. So what we're going to go over tonight, like I said, relates a lot to talking to humans, and it also sounds like the mom test that Glimpse referenced is really similar to some things that we're going to go over tonight and some things that are talked about in talking to humans. So both of those are good examples of things that you can read that'll help you prepare for the customer interviews that you're going to do. Go ahead and end that poll. All right, so if you're new to the competition, we had a few people register in the last week or so. So just so you know, you can catch all the recorded workshops on our YouTube channel. After tonight, I'll edit the recording of this and send that out hopefully by the end of the week. And once you go to that video, the whole playlist of all the previous workshops will be there as well. And any of the previous homework assignments like the business model canvas, the business assumptions, napkin drawing, anything that you want feedback on, feel free to turn into the BMC email still. I think all the feedback on at least most of the canvases that we received has gone out. I think maybe one or two came in this week that we didn't get to, but we'll start doing feedback on the business assumption exercises and the napkin drawing soon. So hopefully by the next workshop, we'll be able to get you some more detailed feedback. Chat. Thank you, Lola, for posting that. So, okay. Let's talk about why startups fail. So out of all of these reasons that are listed on the screen, what do you think is the number one reason why most startups fail? So to be clear, all of these are the top reasons, but what do you think out of these is the number one reason why most fail? Feel free to put it in the chat or just say it out loud.
No market need.
All right, we got no market need, no business model. Anybody else want to take a shot at it? All right. Looks like we're about half and half, guessing. All right, so a lot of you are really smart, and you know that no market need is the number one. So tackling problems that are interesting to solve rather than those that actually serve a market need was cited as the number one reason for failure. So out of the 101 cases of startups who failed that they studied, about 41 of those were because there was no market need. So when you think about that, it's you're building this whole product or service or something that turns out nobody in the market really needs it. It's not a problem that people want to pay to solve. So not having a market need can also cause you to run out of cash because you're going down a dead end to provide this product that the problem doesn't even exist for. So this is what we want to avoid having you doing. So doing your customer interviews is really important for that reason. So here's a couple of quotes about specific companies that were cited in this article I got the data from about why they failed. So Patient Communicator, they said, I realized essentially that we had no customers because no one was really interested in the model we were pitching. Doctors want more patients, not an efficient office. So this sounds like they talked to a lot of doctors as their customer segment, and they thought the problem they were solving was that they needed a more efficient office. And so they built this whole solution to solve that problem. But what they found out, probably through more customer interviews, is that doctors didn't really care about how efficient their office was. What they wanted was more patients. And so they needed a solution that helped them get more patients, not necessarily run their office more efficiently. And here's another one. I really like the way that they stated this. So Treehouse Logic is another startup that failed. And what they had to say was startups fail when they're not solving a market problem. We were not solving a large enough problem that we could universally serve with a scalable solution. We had great technology, great data on shopping behavior, great reputation as a thought leader, great expertise, great advisors, etc. But what we didn't have was technology or a business model that solved a pain point in a scalable way. So all of this data and these quotes strengthens this argument that we have that you need to be doing multiple customer interviews and determining whether or not there is this real burning market need for your idea before you put loads of money and time into solving a problem that doesn't exist. Even if you think your solution is interesting, amazing, exciting, everything that you guys are working on, all the ideas that you have are really interesting, amazing, or exciting. But if you go out and talk to your customers and you find that's not really a problem they have, or it's not a big enough problem that they're really willing to pay you to solve it for them, or nobody's willing to pay you to solve it for them, then you're kind of going down a dead end.
And Emily, if I might also add, it's very much what Glimpse had talked about was they interviewed a lot of people before they started honing in on their final idea of making sure that they didn't code stuff up until they knew where they were going.
Yeah, so you can avoid wasting money on making stuff that nobody wants. So sometimes you might interview a bunch of customers and you determine that there is a need. Like what you got out of those interviews is that your idea is the perfect solution, everyone will buy it, and they'll spend tons of money on it. And then you build the product, you go, you launch it, and then nobody actually buys it. So why do you think that that would happen? That you did all of these interviews and they seemed to go really well, people were really positive, but then nobody bought the thing that you made. What's a reason that that might happen? Cost. Right, so bad interview data. So it could be because you conducted your customer interviews in a way that biased the results toward the positive, towards supporting your solution. So thinking about what Glimpse said, that, you know, if you interview your mom, she's always going to say that she loves it. She doesn't want to hurt your feelings. She thinks everything that her child does is amazing, so she's going to tell you it's amazing. Or maybe you asked leading questions in your interview where you said, wouldn't it be great if, and then nobody wanted to say no because you already built up this whole story about how great it would be. Or maybe you didn't ask enough open-ended questions to really get honest feedback. You just asked yes or no questions, and you didn't really get any real insights from that. So think back to the first activity we did with the people watching in the public spaces. If you already had a product in mind to help those people before talking to them or getting to know their story, you might end up just kind of selling your product to them when you're talking in these customer interviews. You won't really be getting insights into the learning of what their problems that they face are, why they face those problems, and why they can't currently solve it. So when you go into these really early customer interviews, you really just want to focus on finding out what their problems are to begin with, and not leading them down this path to saying that your product would be awesome and that they would pay a lot of money for it. You want to really know that you're solving a solution, you're solving a problem for them, and that they're willing to pay for it because you can kind of quantify how big the problem is for them. So we're going to go through these 12 tips for your early customer interviews. So keep in mind, most of the things I'm going to talk about now are like these early interviews that you're going to have with customers. A lot of you in here are pretty early in your ideas. You're still figuring them out. So if you don't have something built yet or a product actually made to take to people, that's great. That's where you want to be before you put a lot of money and time into that. You want to be doing these customer interviews in the beginning to make sure that you're going down the right path. So the first tip is you want to only interview one person at a time as much as possible. So just avoid things like focus groups. Those can tend to lead to things like groupthink. You know, that's like if everybody else in the room answers the question no, but you wanted to answer it yes, you may be really unlikely to say something if it's different than what the rest of the group think is. And also it can create distractions if you have a big focus group. The people might know each other, or they're just paying attention to wanting to talk to their friend about the football game this weekend or something, instead of really being able to focus on the questions that you're asking. So you can consider bringing someone else with you to take notes, or virtually, since a lot of your interviews might be through Zoom or something, you can record the interview. So that allows you to just completely focus entirely on the conversation, and most importantly on body language and facial expressions. So people tend to lie sometimes. Like if they're taking a survey, they may lie, but in person or via Zoom or something, you can actually see them face to face. You can watch their body language, and a lot of people have pretty good tells of when they're not telling you the truth, or you can see when they get uncomfortable with a question or thinking about a certain situation. So it helps a lot to not be feverishly writing down notes as the person is responding. You want to actually watch them and be able to focus on what they're saying when they're saying it. So the second tip is you want to know your goals and questions ahead of time. So detail your assumptions that you've made about your solution, like we did in the last workshop. And then you want to prioritize what you want to learn from the interview before you go into it. So decide who you want to talk to, so your different customer segments, and then target your interviewees based on that. And then before you go into the actual interview, you want to prep, kind of a basic interview outline and a list of questions that you want to ask. It's totally acceptable, and you probably will veer off from that. You don't want to think of it as like a script that you're just following word for word, but you do want to come prepared with a guide. And I know sometimes for me, if I'm doing any sort of interview, I just write down questions and have that list in front of me, so that it's easy to get distracted. But if you have that list, it makes you feel better to know, okay, there are these 3 questions I want to make sure I ask every person that I talk to. So I'm going to make my way back to this list no matter what happens. So the question about surveys, we'll get to that later. Surveys aren't necessarily a bad thing, but I'll kind of tell you why doing these human to human interviews are a little bit better. So you want to separate your feedback and behavior.
Emily, sorry.
Oh, yep.
One thing I also want to add with the thoughts on the goals and the questions is also emphasizing the first few chapters of the book, is that as everyone has their basic business model canvas laid out, you've made a lot of assumptions about each of the boxes that you put in there. So for example, the 2 biggest ones would be value proposition and customer segment. And so sort of your hypothesis is, we believe that this population segment has this problem and that our solution would benefit them. And so again, you don't have data, you're guessing, which is what you're supposed to be doing, but one of your goals would be to figure out, okay, how many of these people do I interview actually have this problem? And so just, you can tie it back to any questions that you have in your things that you aren't sure about in your business model canvas, can always be, emphasized or de-emphasized or strengthened based on the interviews that you're doing. All right, back to you.
So the third point here is separating the feedback and behavior in your discussion. So decide prior to the interview if you're looking for learning on the customer's mindset and their behavior, so learning about the problems that they encounter and how they currently solve those, or if you're looking for direct feedback or usability insights on your solution. So don't do a mix of both in one discussion flow. So don't go back and forth between, how do you currently solve this problem, and then immediately present your solution and ask them for their feedback on how it works. That kind of makes things get a little distorted or harder to follow. It makes it harder for you to drill down into what the actual problem is. I understand, like, people are busy right now, and you might only get one interview with a person to begin with. So if you have to do both in one, asking for feedback on your actual solution and trying to drill down to the problem, make sure you start with that mindset and behavior discussion before you go into asking for feedback, so it's not a back and forth. And so this last one here is really important. So get psyched to hear things that you don't want to hear. So if you don't do this, you'll find yourself trying to sell your solution or convince your customer instead of learning from them by listening to what they have to say. So you might also tend to only hear what you want to hear in an interview, which is kind of confirmation bias. So I think about this like when I'm writing a research paper, and sometimes I do it the wrong way, and I write up the whole thing before looking up any sources. And then I go and I try to find sources that have quotes or something I can fit into my paper into the opinion that I'm already arguing. And I tend to get frustrated with that process sometimes when I can't find anything that seems to back up what I'm saying. And I'm like, I just need a quote that says exactly this. But then I start thinking about it, I'm like, well, maybe I'm not finding anything because that's not the actual situation here. Maybe my opinion is not right. So the correct behavior when you're doing that is you first do your research and then you form your opinion based on the research that you found. And then you write your paper using those sources as backup for why you have this newly formed opinion. So when you're hearing things that you don't want to hear, it should really be an exciting thing, because you had this assumption about your solution, your business model, it was challenged, and then you gained a new insight from the customer that you didn't have before. So when that person tells you something like, oh, that's not really the problem that I have, or I don't really think that's a solution that works for me, or I wouldn't pay for that, or my employer wouldn't pay for that, you have to get excited to hear that, because at least you didn't get deep into building something and then you found out nobody really wanted it. This is still early enough that you have the opportunity to pivot. Like you heard Glimpse talk about, and other people have talked about, multiple pivots that they made. So when you hear those things that you initially think is something you don't want to hear, it's actually a really valuable insight to have, because that will make business decisions for you. Okay, so the next tip is to disarm politeness training. So people are trained to be nice and basically to not call your baby ugly. And your idea, the solution you're working on, it's your baby. It's something you're really passionate about. And the person you're interviewing probably knows that you're really passionate and excited about that. So they may feel uneasy telling you, I don't really think that's a good idea, or I wouldn't use that. So at the beginning of the interview, you want to ask them up front, please be brutally honest with me. If you think this is not a good idea, don't just be nice to me, because I actually want to build a solution that's going to solve your problem. I want to really understand your problem. Don't just agree with me because that's the nice thing to do. I really want to help you, and I can only help you if you're honest. And that's where a lot of people may not still be honest, because that politeness training is so deeply ingrained in them, and that's why the body language is so important. If you look up, there's probably lots of books that you can find about body language. I can try to find some articles to send out, things that you can watch, and there's a lot of things people do that signal that they're not telling the truth, or that they're uncomfortable in the situation. So that would be really good things to look up before you go into an interview, so you can kind of catch those things. The second point here is really important too. Don't just ask a bunch of yes or no questions, or at least if you ask a yes or no question, always follow up with a more open-ended question like, why? Or tell me more about that. Because you're not really going to get a lot of good insights from just yes, no, maybe. Like, you want them to really go deep into everything that they're saying. So the third point here is focus on their actual behavior, not speculative or abstract feelings. So one thing is people don't really know what they want, and they're not very good at predicting their own actions or feelings. So it's not your job to ask the customer to design the solution. It's your job to figure out the best solution to the problems that they're experiencing. So like, who knew we all needed to have a phone, calendar, MP3 player, recipe book, all in one device that fits in our pocket? Like, customers did not know that they needed the iPhone until there was an iPhone. So if you would have gone to them and asked, do you need something that is your phone, calendar, MP3 player, all these things, and do you need to carry it around with you at all times and feel like you can't live without it? I don't think anybody would have really said yes to that, or not very many people would have come up with an iPhone. They wouldn't have come up with it themselves as a solution. So it's your job to find out what their problem is and then to design a solution that solves that problem. And then people love talking about cool features and possible solutions to these problems that they're having. But in your interviews, you want to stay focused on factual information and focus on learning from them. So ask them to tell you stories about how they previously experienced a problem when trying to complete some sort of job that they have, or if that job is getting food delivered to them, that's still a job that they have. And if they tried to solve it, or why they didn't try to solve it, and then what happened when they did try to solve that. And then also ask them if they've used other solutions like competitors, maybe indirect or direct, to solve their problem, and then what happened with those. So you're really focused on learning from them and not talking about all the ways in which you could possibly solve their problem. And then finally, listen and don't talk. Obviously, you have to talk enough to ask your questions and get your follow-up in, but you're learning at this point, you're not selling. So you want to shut up as much as possible and keep your questions short. And then really important is don't fill up the space with words just because there's a long pause or something. The customer might be thinking, or they have more to say, and I'm a person who kind of takes a long time to think about things before it comes out of my mouth. And usually if you give somebody a second after a pause, what they say next is a really insightful thing, that if you cut them off, they're not likely to then interrupt you and say, no, wait, I had more to say about that. So you always don't be uncomfortable with silence. Let there be enough silence that then they say something else, and that might trigger a whole other area to go into that wouldn't have happened if you just started talking again. Right, so this is the last page of tips. You want to follow your nose and drill down. So that means anytime that something piques your attention, somebody says something, you're like, oh, that's really interesting, tell me more about that. You want to drill down with those follow-up questions like why, or tell me more about that. So one approach you can take is called the 5 whys. So to drill down to the real customer that customers are facing, you basically ask why 5 times. So this is an example of that, and it's not a great example, but it's what I could come up with. Say that you're doing a customer interview, and that customer states that they were late to work that day because their car broke down. So then you ask them, 1, why did the car break down? And they say, because it ran out of gas. And then you say, why did the car run out of gas? And they say, because I forgot to put gas in it this morning. And then you say, well, why did you forget to put gas in? And they say, because I was running late. And you say, why were you running late? And they say, my alarm didn't wake me up on time. And you say, well, why doesn't your alarm wake you up? That's the 5th why. And they say, too easily snoozed. So after you drilled down these 5 layers, you see that the problem had nothing to do with their car. It was really the alarm clock, and they need a better alarm clock so the rest of their morning doesn't get, rushed, and then they forget to put gas in their car and then it breaks down. So some people might get annoyed by being asked why 5 times. So you got to know the person you're interviewing enough to know if they're going to like going that deep. But just kind of keep that in mind of just keep asking why. Why does that happen? Why is that a problem? And have them explain to you all the way down to, multiple layers so you get to what the real root of the problem is. And then you want to repeat back a customer's response to like the most important topics to make sure you get it right. So when you repeat it back to them, it gives them the opportunity to elaborate a little bit more, or if you misrepresent it, it gives them the opportunity to correct you if you were wrong on what you thought that they said. And sometimes hearing their own response back will also make them want to give you a little bit better or more full of an answer. And then this is also important. So when you're starting interviews, it may be hard to get a large group of people to interview. So one thing to do at the end of every interview is to ask the person you're interviewing for 1 to 3 other people that you should talk to. So if you're talking to somebody in a customer segment that's maybe industry specific, they probably know other people that are experiencing the same problem they are, and ask them to please, introduce you to 1 to 3 other people. So that way you don't end up only interviewing people who are your friends or family just because they're the people closest enough to you to get an interview set up. Using referrals can extend your network of people that you can interview. And then finally, you want to write up your notes kind of as soon as possible after the interview is over. It's good now that things are virtual and you can record, but you still do want to kind of add your own commentary as soon as you can after the interview, so you don't let kind of too much time go by without you really summarizing the insights and then figuring out how you might need to pivot based on those. Arnold, do you have anything else to add?
No, that was good.
Okay, so after your interview, you want to look for patterns through all of the data that you're going to get, the answers to these questions. And then this is kind of answering the question earlier about these one-on-one interviews versus surveys. So you need to then use your kind of human judgment to read between the lines in the customer interviews. So what people say they do is not always what they actually do. So patterns can be a little tricky to interpret, but if you're reading body language, understanding the context of the person's job, and understanding what that person's agenda might be, then you can kind of filter out any inherent biases or any data that may not be completely accurate and honest. So that's the benefit of human judgment in these kind of interviews that you can't get from a survey. So survey results are just naturally less reliable because you don't know if that person is telling you the truth. They're good for getting, kind of large amounts of data, but you want to have good quality kind of one-on-one customer interviews to be able to back up the survey results as well. And then you want to use those patterns that you've discovered, the insights that you have, to make adjustments to your business model based on those insights. So we got about 15 minutes left here to do our mock interview exercise. So what we're going to do here is we're going to get some practice leading a customer interview. So we're going to break out into random groups and breakout rooms. You're not going to be with your team because it doesn't really matter. You're not doing interviews on your actual topic right now. So one person is going to be the interviewer, and then we'll probably only have time to do one interviewee. And so you'll be given kind of a general, kind of vague topic, like I think one is dating, one's just like food. And then you want to, whatever the person you're interviewing is, whatever customer segment they represent, so maybe like a Gen Z female or something, you'll ask, what are problems that you encounter when it comes to dating? Kind of questions like that to kind of dig down to what the biggest problem that they're facing in that area is. And then you don't really have a solution yet that would solve that, but the moderator will be in the room to kind of take notes on your interview style and your skills. Like you asked too many yes or no questions, those kinds of things, and just give a little feedback and a little practice on doing these interviews. So, and people really don't want to do the breakout sessions. I just saw like 8 people
Everybody
leave. I think we could probably, since we don't have that many people left now, just maybe do it just here in the main room instead of going out into breakout rooms.
I think do the breakout because that way they can really. I mean, you can even just do groups of 2s or 3s if everyone's
Okay.
still here.
Let me,
That way they can actually practice the interview.
okay. Some of you I didn't put in a room because you'll stay here with me. Okay.
Hi, Emily.
Hello. You're stuck with me again. Were you with me last night? All right. So let me share a different thing here. So, all right. So this is actually going to be less specific than I have it here. So we're just going to go with friendship. So trying to make friends. It doesn't have to necessarily be a social networking app. So if one of you wants to volunteer to be the interviewer, and then the other 2 can be the interviewees. You guys have preference on which one you are?
Quick question. The
Yeah.
customer segment, is that also an
No.
assumption?
No, this will just be, we didn't know who was going to end up in each room, so whatever, you don't have to act like you're a like Gen Z female. Yeah, so.
But I guess more generally, like, do people assume their customer segment, or is that something people try to prove as well, that this particular group is my customer, something like that?
So a lot of times how like the process kind of happens when people are coming up with these ideas is sometimes you can pick a customer segment that you want to solve a problem for. So like I want to solve a problem for stay-at-home moms in their 30s. And then you go interview a bunch of stay-at-home moms in their 30s and they tell you what their biggest problems are. Then you know, design a solution that will fix them. If you already have an idea of what you want to do, which I think most people in the competition here do, you can kind of do some market research and see kind of I think we may talk about this in the next workshop, but there's resources through the parish library where you can get actual market reports that will tell you a lot of insights about the kinds of people that normally, you know, are interested in certain industries or products, things like that. So it can kind of go either way. You have an idea and then you find a customer segment that you think would be your target customer, or you can kind of pick a target customer and then design a solution that fits them. So in this case, we're just giving you a vague topic here. So the customer segment is just going to be like whatever you are. So who wants to be the interviewer?
Yeah, and for the answers, like it will be based on personal experiences, right?
Yeah, so you're not pretending to be
Okay.
anybody else, just answer it the way that you would answer it.
Okay, I'm fine with answering the question.
Okay.
I guess I'll ask the questions.
All right, sounds good. All right, so the general topic is friendship. So, you know, you can, I'll just give you a question that maybe could start it off of, you know, what's the biggest problem that you face when, you know, trying to make friends on campus or whatever the situation may be for your customer target. So you guys can go ahead and I'll just kind of make notes as we're going along about kind of if that was a good question or not.
Okay. So I think the first challenge is to start any conversation with strangers. So just like trying to make a new friendship is the fear of approaching. I feel personally for me, as to how do you go and just start up a random conversation.
I guess I'll say for me, I feel like friendships mostly come up organically. It's just people I'm working by, people I talk to a lot, and then guess people I get along with more, hang out with more, and it kind of goes like that. So I guess I don't think about making friends that much. It just kind of.
Would you be able to say like what question you asked? I didn't get it. I was gonna ask, but then they started answering. So
Oh, I just asked like, what's the biggest problem that you face when trying to make friends on campus?
okay. So do I start asking questions now
Yeah,
then?
you go ahead and
Alright.
you continue the rest of the interview. Yep.
Sure. Have you guys made friends this past school year during COVID?
Yes, I have.
Uh,
And yeah, so with the ones who I have taken courses with. So
okay. And
Kind of get to the how do I define a friend? Like,
um,
I've met people and I'm friendly with them, but what is exactly a friendship? What's the threshold?
that you guys talk to each other frequently, and you guys, you know, yeah, you guys talk to each other frequently, I guess, and have like a good relationship. You guys like each other, and like you guys hang out if possible.
I'll say no new friends.
All right. Um, this is kind of tough asking the questions. I'm not gonna lie.
That's why we're
Okay.
practicing now.
Um, how? Well, I'm just gonna try to think of questions then. So if
So just
they're
to interject a little bit, I will give
all right,
feedback while you're doing it just because we don't have as much time as I originally planned. But when he said that he didn't make any friends, you should have just asked why not? What prevented
yeah,
you from doing that? Tell me more about why you haven't made any more friends.
okay. So I guess can we just go with that then?
Yep.
Why haven't you made any friends?
I guess like I don't try to make friends. I guess so.
Okay.
I guess yeah. If there's like a new person that I interact with, then maybe that develops into a friendship. But I guess I don't go about with the intent to make friends. I guess
Why don't you go about making the intent to make friends?
because I guess it's just kind of happened. So I have people to hang out with. So I feel like I have friends. So I guess when I first moved here, maybe then it was more of an intent to try to develop relationships with people. But then once you have that and you're busy with life, you don't, I guess, keep wanting to try to make new friends because of effort and you have people you already kind of feel like you vibe with and hang out with.
So if there was an easier way to make friends, say there's like an app or like a website where you can just like sit down, you don't have to go anywhere, you could just meet people through there, would like is that something that is interesting that you're interested in?
I'll say for me, that just sounds very superficial and feel like there'd be a lot of weirdos or feel like it's hard to make friends through apps and things like that.
Okay.
yeah, I mean, if you're defining like just to meet new people, I'm okay with that. But I agree with Ravinderjeet as its friendship is organic. So like I'll be open to the idea to meet new people a couple of times, but when we say friendship, it's a two-way relationship, right? So it
Hmm.
has to be developed.
It's a
Okay.
fantastic
So just a
pronunciation.
little feedback on the way that you kind of asked the question
Hmm.
led them into a possible solution. So you said like an app, like a website, something like that.
Hmm.
Kind of just change the phrasing of the question of like, so how do you currently make friends? Or, like something that's not designing the solution for them yet, just trying to get to what the actual problem is before you're like, oh, would this help? Because they might say yes, or they might just be like, no. But you're really just trying to learn what the actual problem is or how they when they have done it successfully in the past, how they did it, and then you can start thinking of a solution that kind of mimics their more natural, organic way of making friends. If that makes sense.
Okay.
I promise I won't pick apart every question you ask.
No, you're good. I'm just trying to think of a question. So, okay, you guys said it's like, you guys meet friends organically. How about if it was like specifically to like Purdue students, like no one else would be able to, like only Purdue students, like only those students are able to, you can only communicate with them because you guys said it would be like random people, right? What if it was just specifically Purdue students that this platform you guys would be able to connect with? I don't know it's kind of hard for me to explain, but do you guys understand what I'm trying to say?
Kind of. I'd say for me, it'd be more interesting if it was around like certain things. Like for example, I've started playing Rocket League.
Mm-hmm.
I could meet more people playing Rocket League. That could be something I'd be interested in. Like if it was around a thing that I don't know a lot of other people who do, and it was a way to meet people who did that, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, I would like to know more people who play soccer or basketball so that I can just uh, plan accordingly, like have a group of people to play sports.
Second that.
Okay, so you guys are saying like you like the concept of like Purdue students, but now you guys are going more into like groups then, right? So you guys want to be more specific into what your interests are and like what, yeah. Okay.
You could find me people to hoop with more often. I'd do that.
All right.
So I think we have other people coming back from the other rooms now, but yeah, really good job on kind of digging deeper into the levels of why they can't make friends currently. All right. Arnold, how did your room go?
It was good.
Good.
Good practice session.
So I kind of recommend to people to kind of do these mock interviews with your friends or anybody because it'll just help. I know like someone in our group said it's hard to like ask these questions. So just the more practice that you have doing it, the more comfortable you are like asking why multiple times, the more comfortable you will be doing it with a real live customer. So just oh, go ahead.
I would say one of the comments I made to both to Colin and Nancy in our group was that your first 10 interviews are going to be bad, but that's okay. I mean, you're going to need to practice, and the more you do, the better you'll get. And then they also asked, Nancy asked roughly, oh, there it is.
Okay.
How many interviews should they expect to be doing?
Okay, so just to let everybody kind of know, part of the criteria for the competition, so like in the rounds of the competition, we like to see people do like lots of customer interviews. So 100 sounds like a lot, but the more customers you interview, the more insights you get, and the more well-rounded your value prop and everything is going to be. So you want to start now with coming up with your list of 550 to 100 people that you want to interview over the next few months. And I would lean heavily to the 100 side of it, or even more of that, because you're going to come up with a list of all these people that would be perfect to talk to, but you may not get a meeting or an interview with all of them. So list as many people as you possibly can. And so as a homework assignment, Lola just posted in the chat the customer interview template file. So that's just a pretty simple thing that I put together where you will list your team name and your value prop, a little description of your idea, and then list out the different customer segments that you have. So you might have more than one. And then I just put a little table that has 10 entries in it for name, company that person might be with, if that matters, if you're selling to businesses or anything, and then their contact information. You can edit that however you want, add as many people as you want. It's just a way of kind of organizing it. And you can feel free to submit that to us, to the BMC email, and we can give you feedback on, like, maybe you should, for this customer segment, be talking to people more in these companies or something. That'll just give us an idea of how many people you have listed, and if you're having trouble coming up with people or places that you should go to interview people, we can also give you feedback and help you out with that. And then the other part of the homework is reading the rest of Talking to Humans. So if you already read the whole thing, you're ahead of the game. But it's just part 2 of it, pretty short read, and that'll kind of wrap up the whole, how am I supposed to actually talk to these customers when I get the interview. All right. So thinking ahead to the next workshop is the 16th, and this is actually our last workshop until January. So I think it's like the week after, whatever, is Thanksgiving, and then everybody will leave, and then we'll come back the first week of the spring semester, so the week of January 19th, to do the next part of the value prop workshop. So it's a 2-parter, because in January we'll kind of refresh what we learned in the last one, since it will have been 2 months since the last workshop. So before our next workshop on the 16th, and your homework assignment of listing out the customer segments and specific people you want to talk to in those segments, start thinking about very specifically who those customer segments are and the jobs that they're performing. So not just like it's a person, like an employee at work performing a job. The job might be that they need to get food delivered, or they need to eat, something like that. So that'll help you if you already have those in mind, those jobs that your customer needs to perform, and what pain points you can alleviate with your solution. That'll help a lot with the exercise that we'll do in the next workshop. So are there any questions?
Quick question. I don't know if I missed this, but was there a thought on online surveys versus in-person interviews?
Yes, so and Arnold may be able to add to this a little bit more, but the online surveys are good if you want to get like a lot of data, get like 3,000 people to answer your survey. It's just not as reliable, or you can't get as many insights out of like having a one-on-one conversation. So I would use, like, you can do surveys and have that data, but you also want to have these kinds of interviews with people to kind of back up what the survey data says.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of surveys, and I was thinking about this when you posted it, and part of the reason is, a lot of the reasons what Emily has said is that you're not going to get insightful information, and really you're asking them in essence kind of yes/no questions. And the other thought is, if you imagine any survey that you've taken, you've probably spent an entire 2 minutes or 1 minute filling it out, versus if you can get 30 or 40 minutes in person with someone, you're going to get much better insights. And so people aren't going to be able to write down, hey, can you tell me about the top 3 problems you have? Right? You're not going to send a survey out like that and people are going to respond, because then you really need to be able to ask the follow-up question. So we really, really strongly recommend face-to-face or Zoom kind of interviews.
And those kind of interviews can help you build a relationship with the person. So like, you can go back to that person and interview them after you have made your pivots or, changes to your business model, and then like you've already talked to them and then you can go back to them. It's not like survey data isn't like a relationship that you have with all of those people who filled it out.
Particularly if they resonate with, or you're kind of resonating with the problem that they have, they'll be very eager to talk to you if you want to follow up and say, okay, I heard that these were your top 2 problems. Could we have a follow-up, because I might have a solution for you. And so then again, like Emily said, you can start to build relationships, and maybe they'll be potential customers. So it's one of those, you're kind of in it for the long haul, where you're starting. And for most of you on here, I just recommend saying, well, hey, I'm a student at Purdue. I was wondering if I can get 15 or 20 minutes of your time. and I'd like to ask you questions about topic XYZ. And then just start there, and then be very mindful of the time too. It's like, okay, our 20 minutes is up. I appreciate your time. You know, and they may say, oh no, I got more time, or this is really interesting. And again, you're not trying to sell them anything, just trying to find out information. Again, being a student, you know, when Emily had mentioned about putting your list together, Purdue alumni love talking with students. So, you know, one of the great parts is that LinkedIn exists today, where you can pretty easily filter, hey, I'm looking for a buyer who works for Procter and Gamble in Cincinnati, who's a Purdue alum, and you could actually find that person. And then you could actually reach out and say, hey, I'm a Purdue alum. I'm just trying to find out more information about how Procter and Gamble looks at the shampoo market. Would you have 20 minutes to help educate me? You'd be surprised how often you can actually get positive hits from alumni by doing that. Other questions?
So you mentioned alumni. How do we actually reach them?
LinkedIn is a great option. So if you have, you know, if A, first you got to get a LinkedIn profile, B, search, and then through LinkedIn, there's like this kind of a contact that person. So you can do it that way. And then the good part is also, you know, emphasizing what Emily had talked about earlier is that once you get that first interview, at the end you say, who else in the industry do you think I should talk to? And then they can say, oh, you should talk to Joe who works over here, and you should talk to Mary who works over here. And you can ask, would you mind making an introduction for me? And then, right, then you really only need to get to one person, and that person can get, each person can get you more people. It takes some work to find people.
Any other questions? And thanks everybody for joining us on your reading day that you would have otherwise had off. Appreciate it. All right.
I have a quick unrelated question.
Yeah.
Just for the business model canvas, after you got your feedback, should we send you another copy of the revised one?
Yeah, that'd be great. Whenever you revise it, feel free to keep sending them for feedback. We'll keep providing feedback.
That's perfect.
All right. Well, everybody have a good night. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Thank you.